Hi everyone, this is Abel. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about all the books I'm planning to read during the month of November. But before we start, remember that if you like science fiction and fantasy book, especially space opera and big epic fantasy books, this channel is perfect for you. So consider subscribing, leaving a like, and remember, every interaction really helps a lot. The first book I'm going to read during the month of November is actually a reread for me. It is Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill. I've read this book when it came out a few years ago, and I have really fond memories about it. It is a reread because Ryan Cahill actually released 3 main books in the series and a bunch of novella, and when I received the last novella, because I'm lucky enough to be part of the ARC reader group for this amazing series, I realized that my memories, especially for book 2 and a good chunk for book 3, they were not that squeaky clean. I remember they were not that clear. So I remember the general setting, the plot and the main characters, but I got the feelings that a few of the most important nuances of the series, they were lost to me. So it is with great pleasure actually that I'm going to embark to do a reread of the whole series. I remember that I've met Ryan on Facebook for the first time a few years ago when he was on the process to begin market the first book and to even before he published the first book. So, and I remember that there was a fantasy readers and writers group on Facebook, which is still there and it's very healthy. When he was posting, he was talking about his writing process, his writing and publishing process, and he captured my attention with a little bit of art that was going to be featured inside the book. It was a chapter header with a sword hand drawn. And given the fact that I have a background in advertisement and graphic design, that's the kind of detail that really drives me crazy with joy. It fills my heart with joy. That kind of commitment and the wish and the desire to make a book aesthetically pleasing, even in the inside. When you try to make the pages, the reading experience, the act of reading a paperback or even a hardcover book as most pleasurable as possible, it makes me incredibly happy. It fills my heart with hope for the publishing industry when sometimes you see that publishers, they do the bare minimum to make their book readable, and that's either on ebooks or paperback and hardcovers. So I knew that this book was going to be special, but I was not prepared for how much I loved it. So if you don't know, this series is a very classic, very comforting, high fantasy, epic fantasy series. It starts pretty small with a group of guys that they have to run from the little place they live in. They have to embark on a huge adventure. They get separated, they come back together. It has dragons, it has huge evil empires, all the things you expect from that kind of book, but it is written with a modern taste, a modern sensibility. Ryan Cahill is a huge man, both physically and figuratively. You can see that his sensitivity as a person, it bleeds through inside the book. It has huge themes. It explores themes about friendship, about family, about commitment. There's the chosen one trope, but it is not exactly that kind of chosen one trope you've been reading for 20 or 30 years. It is special, it is magic. The first book is one of my favorite fantasy books of all times, and I can't wait to reread it again, because I'm sure it will make me appreciate book 2 and book 3 even more. Book 4 is coming too, and there's a bunch of novella, especially the last one, The Eyes, which I have not still read. that everybody says that The Ice is amazing. It's probably the best novella he have ever written. The Exile is very good, and The Fall is very good. Those are the titles of the other two novellas. So I can explain you how much that series is dear to my heart, and how happy I am to have the chance to be between the few first people reading that series, and to be able to give you finally my thoughts about it on YouTube. Of course, you'll find reviews about all the other books of this series on Goodreads, on my Goodreads profile, and I've mentioned it many times on my Instagram. And if you haven't understand by just listening to me, I'm Italian, and I'm very happy to say that this series will come to Italy too. So it's going international. I'm proud. My boy Ryan, you're doing an amazing job, and I can't wait to tell to everybody of you what I think about my reread of Blood and Fire. The second book I'm going to read is the first of a series. It is Jade City by Fonda. Now I'm pretty sure that every one of you have heard something about this series because it is one of the most loved in the last couple of years on BookTube. Actually, I've heard about it everywhere, constantly. Everybody's gushing about how good the series is, and it looks like every book is better than the latter. And so book 2 is better than book 1. Book 3 is actually some kind of a masterpiece. And I'm kind of shy about books that get so much praise, because I'm often on the other side when everybody loves something like that way, so passionately, so profoundly. It often happens that I can't seem to be able to enjoy a book that much. I know it is weird, but I know that some of you can relate about that. So I've been hesitant, let's say, to pick up this series. But I've been hesitant too because it looks like it is more of a urban fantasy than the usual epic fantasy I enjoy. I like my fantasy book to be, unless they're mixed with science fantasy or some kind of dystopia, but I usually like my fantasy book to be set in a completely different world with completely different rules. And this is actually what's happening in this book, in Jade City. I was not really very well informed about it because it's actually not our world. I was convinced somehow, even having heard about it so many times, that this was set in Tokyo, but it is not. It's a fictional world that looks so much like modern Japan. Well, actually not modern, something like the 60s Japan. And everything revolves around those 4 siblings battling rival clans because they're trying to gain or keep control about Jade. Because every human being that has extraordinary abilities in this world, in this Japan-inspired setting, use Jade. They draw their ability and those powers from Jade. That's really interesting for me because it looks like the book has a huge emphasis on this family dynamic, the way this family is trying to struggle for control. It looks very political, and it looks like it has a huge focus on the way Jade impacts martial arts, the way fighting is used to gain control. So you think that martial arts and novels, they are not matched because it can be really difficult to translate the aesthetic and the movement and the feelings of martial arts in a written way, in prose, in a urban fantasy-esque setting. But everybody says that those fighting scenes are amazing. They're insanely good. So I'm ready to give it a try, ready to give it a chance, and I hope I'll be on the bandwagon praising, chanting, and loving this book like everybody else. And I hope I'll be able to read multiple installments of this series between 1 year, because as you've said, As you know, and as I've told you in my previous videos about the fantasy series I want to read, I'm really bad at consistency and at reading more than one book of a series in 1 year. But I'll surely read Jade City in the month of November. Then I want to read the Dragonbone Chair by Ted Williams. I'm sure that this book needs no introduction to you. This is a huge classic high fantasy, epic fantasy. It's actually considered by many modern writers like the basic inspiration for modern high fantasy and epic fantasy books. It has the classic trope of a boy working in a kitchen that is going to be the chosen one and it's going to ascend to the higher power in the world. And it is of course about dragon, and it has a huge scope. And actually book 3, I think it's one of the longest book ever, is around 104,000 pages long, so it's pretty daunting because I'm a very slow reader. So the idea to get to that book and to spend around 2 or 3 months to read it because I'm so incredibly slow, it's a little bit daunting for me, but I'll give it another try because this is actually a book that I DNF'd a few years ago. Now I realize that it is because I was reading an Italian translation that it was not very good. Actually, the edition, the paperback edition I was using was really uncomfortable to me some way because of the kind of paper, the kind of font they use. It was really small and the distance between lines was incredibly thin. So it was really painful for me, and I could tell that there was some inconsistency in the ways a few character names, a few titles, and a few phrasing they were translated in Italian, so it was not computing with my mind. I felt that there was something strange, something wrong. But since then, I have seen so much videos and I have heard so many people talk about this book, how important it is for modern fantasy, how fundamental it is as a building block of what we consider modern fantasy. So I don't want to skip it. I don't want to lose it. I want to know what all of this is about. There was a particularly gruesome scene at the beginning of book 1 that was really off-putting for me, but I don't know if it was part of that bad reading experience I was having with the Italian edition, or if it was actually too much for me. I haven't heard many people complaining about that specific scene, so I don't know how I will actually relate with it rereading it again for the second time. So let's see, let's try and see. I want to read book 1 at least. I want to give a fair chance to book 2, and I dream about being able to read book 3 in a reasonable amount of time. I don't know if that will actually really happen, but I will certainly try to beat and to finish book 1 pretty soon. Then I will hit DV8, which is a sequel to Lifelike by Jay Kristoff, which I have read during the month of October. I finished it pretty soon. I was reading it in between World of Radiance, and it was a pleasant surprise. And actually not that big of a surprise, because I know Jay Kristoff is that good of a writer, but it was not the kind of book I was expecting. It was pretty different. I'll give you a more detailed review in my wrap-up for the month of October, which is actually my next video after this one. But I enjoyed it pretty much, very much. So I'm going to read book 2, and I know that there are mixed feelings about book 2, and many people consider it is not to be on par with book 1, but a lot of people, they think it's even better than book 1. So I don't know which side of the fight I will be, but I'm pretty excited about reading it because the vibes and the characters and the aesthetic of book 1, they were amazing, and they made me love cyberpunk even more, even if it was not exactly the kind of cyberpunk you will expect. It was more of a post-apocalyptic aesthetic, But I'm not going to tell you anything more about it. The more I speak about it, the closer I get to give you spoilers about book 1, and I don't want to do it, but I'll give you a better review in my next videos. The next book I'm going to read is The Seam of Eternity, the first one in a series called The Veins of Eternity. The author is Rocco Levitas. And this book captured my attention because it's been described by like the Eye of the World meets the Way of Kings. What else should we ask more about an epic fantasy book? So it has a double perspective. A guy who recently lost his sister and has to, because there is a blight infesting the place when they live, and he's going to search for an old man that seems to have the cure. I like the fact that in the description that it's told that a chosen one, a single chosen one, will not be enough. So it looks like the journey of this character will be very difficult. He'll have to find the strength and the courage to go on and find this old man and to gain his trust and his help. And there's another perspective from a girl which is training to become a monk, I think. I'm not really sure about it, but Rocco, if you're looking to this video, correct me if I'm wrong. And it looks like she's doing an amazing progress and becoming more and more approved by the other members of the confraternity that she's going to be part of. But there's something strange about her, something strange going on with her. So it looks like those two perspectives, those 2 points of view are going to cross during the journey of the book. And just the fact that it has this beautiful cover and the vibes of the Wheel of Time and maybe the Way of Kings too, it makes me think that it will be amazing. I have a digital arc for The Forsaken Planet by Ryan Wilson. This one, it has an amazing cover, and it looks like it's an interesting blend of science fiction and fantasy, because the general setting is that one day, in the worst possible way, humanity discovers that we are not alone in the universe, that there are other planets, inhabited planets. They're inhabited by other human beings, and there is a war going on between those different planets and different reigns or empires. And those human beings have incredible supernatural abilities. We discover it as humans and inhabitants of planet Earth in the worst possible way because we have been attacked, and Earth is burning because of that kind of attacks. And the main protagonist of this story is a guy that he has to enlist in an army to become one of the wielders of those amazing power. And there's a prophecy too that it tells that he's the one who's going to prevent that Earth falls apart. It gets completely destroyed as a consequence of this war. So I like this mix. I like the mixing science fiction and fantasy that way. I don't know how the percentage is, how many science fiction there is, and how much science fiction and how much fantasy it is in this book. Where does the scale stops? But I'm intrigued enough. That's why I did this very blunt, very impromptu request to Ryan Wilson to be able to read a digital copy of that book. He was kind enough to send me one and to email me one. So I'm very happy. I'm pretty excited to be able to read this book and give you a proper review pretty soon. I'll read The Way of Edan by Philip Chase. He is not just an amazing booktuber, but it looks like he's a very gifted and extremely talented writer now. And I've heard about The Way of Edan on Twitter. People constantly gushing about how complex and how beautifully written it is. And I have made a very precise effort to know as less as possible about that book, because there's been a lot of chatting about it, a lot of videos on BookTube made about this book, and discussion and interviews and read-alongs, but I have refrained because I don't want to be spoiled because it looks like it has a couple of very good, very hard-hitting plot twists. I just know that the book is very politically driven. There's a huge, not in that way, not in the actually today's politics way, but there is a huge political conflict inside the book, and that religion plays a huge part. And I really like when authors give that kind of a flavor to their world building, when they put that much of effort and care creating not only the basis of the history and the backgrounds of every family, clan, empire or reign they talk about, but when they try to explain how religion influences their life too and their choices, and how it can make or break a kingdom. So given the fact that I'm really interested in that side of every kind of narration, every kind of book, of novel or comic book that I read that has that kind of care, that kind of insight in that facet of the world building, makes me extremely interested, and I'm sure it will be amazing. I've heard many huge books authors giving really high praise about this series, which is actually completed. So if I enjoyed book 1, I'm sure I'll be able to fly through book 2 and 3 because they're pretty short too, and which is a very strange thing for epic fantasy, high fantasy books, because they tend to be really long, you know. So that's a plus for me, it's a win for me, and I'm pretty sure it will be a great experience. The Way of Edan. So that's all I've got for you today. Those are the 6 books I'm going to prioritize during the month of November. Remember that I'm still on the process of reading and enjoying Word of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. It will take me probably the whole month of November to finish it, but I don't want to read just that because it's so long and so chunky. So I'm reading 300 pages of it, then reading something else, then coming back and reading 300 pages, and so on and so on. And then I'm reading the Dragon Tooth comic book series based on The Expanse. It has very good artworks, it has an amazing story, it is everything you need if you are still heartbroken because the TV show, it wasn't actually able to adapt the whole series, even if it looks like there's a good chance that in the not distant future we will have an adaptation of books 7, 8 and 9. But meanwhile, try the comic book series because it is very good. Remember that if you love science fiction and fantasy, especially space opera and big epic huge high fantasy book, this YouTube channel is tailor-made for you. Remember that if you love this kind of videos and you want to see more, remember to subscribe, leave a like. Every kind of interaction really helps a lot. And if you want to interact with me day by day on a daily basis and follow me through my reading journey as a reader and as an author too, you can find me on Twitter and on Instagram. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.